rotating, and we needed to get the names of the people here so we can make sure to give you time. Welcome. It's good to see those of you that are here. We're glad you're here. It's our honor to be volunteer members of the Johnson County Library Board, and we are all dedicated to making the county system the best that it can be. We want this planning to be collaborative, a collaborative effort between board, staff, and the community. Each of us has a piece of the final product, so your input is vital to the future planning for all branches. This meeting is also being videotaped and will be available on the new site, JCPL Next Chapter. And there's some flyers out there that give you the address and everything, so pick one up when you go out. They're outside, so those are there. And also there's a drop box for talking to the board, and also the board's email addresses are also available on the website. So make sure that if you have comments or things that you want to tell us, we're all available through email. So, Todd, turn to you.
We have a terrific library system in Johnson County, and we're here to talk about the entire system, White River, Clark Pleasant, Trafalgar, and Franklin. And we've asked folks to check this sheet if they wish to speak. And Bob Siefker,
absolutely.
you have been selected to go first.
That's fine.
So if you'd give us your thoughts, we'd appreciate it.
All right. My name is Bob Siefker. I live in White River Township. I'm a relative newcomer. We lived here for 26 years. I'm a retired aerospace engineer. You can see I retired from Rolls-Royce. I have an advanced degree in electromagnetic field theory, and I also have a master's degree in business. And I bring that up because I think it gives me a perspective that perhaps might be useful to you, because I would like to encourage you to exercise a great deal of caution and measured responses to things that are happening. I like to reflect a little bit historically about some of the things that have happened in the last, in fact, going back almost 200 years. 200 years ago, 177 years ago, a fellow by the name of Samuel Morse turned the world upside down. And the overland stage business almost went out of business overnight, because now people could send telegraphs from New York City to San Francisco and not have to wait 2 weeks for the letter to get there and 2 weeks for the letter to get back, maybe. So it was a revolutionary discovery. 142 years ago, Alexander Graham Bell invented a device where you no longer needed to tap out dots and dashes. You could, in fact, use the telephone. Now, it was a while before there was coast-to-coast or international calls. 117 years ago, and this sounds like a long time ago, but it's not really, Guglielmo Marconi demonstrated that you could actually transmit electromagnetic waves through the air, and radio was born. It wasn't very practical because there wasn't any way to take these signals and amplify them. You had to pretty much take what you got, and if you're as old as I am, you can remember making a crystal radio with the little crystals you'd find on the railroad tracks from the clinkers that came out of the coal fire. I'm not saying how old I am, but Lee DeForest invented a thing he called the Audion. We now call them vacuum tubes. And it enabled us to be able to amplify signals, and created a total revolution in the era of communication. Again, this is only 117 years ago, 106 years ago. 85 years ago, Philo Farnsworth, a name that you don't hear very often, but he was responsible for inventing the image dissector. And you can probably guess that became the television. It has probably ruined more lives than you could count. 64 years ago, which is within my lifetime now, William Shockley invented the transistor. 53 years ago, IBM delivered the first transistorized computer, the 7090, for its use, and also the first integrated circuit was built. Now I can remember, I went to Purdue in 1964. I was in the Navy, and I got out. I remember the year I got to Purdue, they had upgraded the 7090 to the 7094, and one of the biggest changes was they went from 16 kilobyte of addressable RAM to 64 kilobyte of addressable RAM. It's kilobyte, not megabyte. We're used to thinking in gigabytes. Yeah. This is kilobytes. Went from 16 to 64. People thought they died and gone to heaven on their programming. 41 years ago, the microprocessor was invented. And that's not very long ago that this was made possible to put everything on one chip. Now we take it for granted. If you look at your telephone, if you ever pop it open and violate all the warranties, you'll see that there's only like 4 or 5 chips, and it contains everything. It contains thousands and thousands of circuits, all in one piece. 35 years ago, Tandy, Radio Shack, introduced the personal computer, and that same year, a little bit later, Wozniak and Jobs introduced the Apple II as the first practical desktop computer. 31 years ago, Bill Gates introduced the disk-oriented system, the DOS. I mean, this is ancient history for us now. 31 years ago is ancient history in terms of computers. 30 years ago, the Internet Protocol system, Internet Protocol Suite, was introduced, and this was the birth of the Internet. This is what made it possible for computers to be networked together and to talk to each other. And of course, this turned the world upside down. 21 years ago, Wi-Fi. 17 years ago, DVD. 7 years ago, the Android operating system. The next year, iPhone 1. 4 years ago, Netflix allowed all subscribers to unlimited hours of streaming video. And the whole concept, this is when Blockbuster, I think, saw the handwriting on the wall and saw that things were dramatically changing. Today, there are 306,000 apps for the iPhone, 490,000 apps for the Android. There are so many applications, so many things that it just almost defies anyone to be able to even think about using them all. There are 24 million subscribers to Netflix. If you Google the phrase, "what will libraries look like in the future?" you get 66,000 hits. And I didn't look through all 66,000, but I looked through the first page. And there's a woman, Anna Laura, who is on the website socialnetworklibrarian.com, who had she did kind of an anagram. That's kind of a cute thing, where she took by the English alphabet with some of them missing. And some of the highlights that leaped out at me was that libraries of the future will have to get used to and embrace handheld devices, programs, and hand-sized electronic gadgets of all kinds. iPhones, iPads, and the I question mark. I think she's very insightful. What's next? You know, what is Apple going to come out with next? In the future, it will be assumed that libraries can support and offer materials and trainings on all these devices. It may appear in March, and people are going to be asking for it in April, because they're going to have it. It's going to be there. So this is why I'm saying you need to be adaptive and reactive, at least for the short term. It has to be portable. The library of the future will become increasingly portable as smartphones and other devices make taking the library with you more practical and possible. Readers, whether it's the Kindle, the Nook, the iPad, or some other device, in the future, nearly everyone will have one, and the libraries will need to adapt their formats, collections, and services to suit these. Smaller. And this is what really leaped out at me, because we just went through an evolution where we were going to expand the Franklin Library by a factor of more than 2. And she is saying the libraries in the future will be smaller. Gone will be the days of large libraries full of millions of books. Instead, with the increase in portability and electronic resources, archives will house the millions of copies of many print material, while your standard library will be smaller in terms of physical space. And virtual. The library of the future will see an increase in the popularity of virtual reference and other online services. A man by the name of Daniel Clark made a response to her posting, and he had some very interesting insights. The emphasis has been on books, CDs, and DVDs. These have been physical objects, as the library's been filled with, but those objects are giving way to new objects, electronic devices that access data. Increasingly, writing and written images and sounds are being disseminated in the form of data. And I'm preaching to the choir. I told Gretchen before, I said, number one, I admire all of you, because I know how difficult it is to be on a volunteer board of directors. I served on the board of directors at Johnson County ARC for 6 years. So my hat is off to you. We really appreciate it. And you guys probably got the toughest board in the world right now, because you have to guess what's coming. And even the people at Apple, the people at MS, at Microsoft, they can't guess it. And sometimes they're the ones driving the bus. And if that doesn't scare you, nothing should. Again, the message that I'd like to leave you with is, based on my years of business and engineering, if a division manager came to me and said, I want to expand, or I want to change significantly, I would say, why do you want to change? What's your data? What do you see that says that it's coming? And in the library science business, boy, I mean, it's almost a dartboard. What's around the corner? Who knows? There could be something that is just as revolutionary as Morris was to the Overland Stage Company, or that the wireless communications was to the transatlantic cable, if you're old enough to remember that. You know, there's just, it's almost scary how fast technology moves. So with that, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your efforts, for the hard work that you put in for the library. But, you know, be business smart. Don't do something that you're not sure what's coming down the path without retaining the resources to react what actually shows up. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Mr. Chambers.
Yes, I'm Forrest Chambers, White River Township, and I on the advisory committee that we worked on with you folks for a year at least. I think in one of the latter meetings, it was such a large project you were trying to get downtown, I mentioned that you might want to have a backup plan, and I hope you're getting one, because I think in this day and age, people are just not going to support such a large project that, and I kind of agree. I feel like this gentleman just said that libraries I don't think are going to get that much bigger, maybe smaller. So I think the thing is to concentrate on the things we can do to improve what we have. If we have to add on someplace, like Franklin, I think that should be done in a very reasonable form and not a giant project. People would probably go along with that. The improvements, I like here at White River, well, you've heard me say this before, but I think a drive-up book and video DVD drop-off would be a very nice thing to have. And by just bringing maybe an asphalt drive around behind the library, or drop off through the wall, and then meet the existing drive that goes all the way to the northeast corner would not be a super big project. And I also have mentioned that I stepped it off in the middle of the driveway, which you usually have to, parking lot, you usually have to park out that far, to the front door. Now is like 100 yards, length of a football field. So in inclement weather, it may rain again someday, I'm not too sure, but just in case it did, or even snow and there's a lot of children come here, people dragging these children across. This is almost a busy driveway right out here, and I think that it would be, you still have to do that to get in the library, but so to solve that problem, I would think all you'd have to do is this west door is to build steps down. The sidewalk's already there, the door's there. You would have to probably put another security, whatever you call that, and but you could still have the old entrance for handicapped, and the restrooms could stay there. That would not be a horribly expensive project either. And it'd be right there at the parking lot. You still have to cross the driveway, but I think little things and medium things like that would be the way to go. At Franklin, if you want something downtown, and I did favor downtown if you're going to do something, because that should be the center of everything, I feel. The possibility, and I mentioned this also, is the old government building. It's just one block north of the courthouse, one block west. And it would be small, but it wouldn't be much of a library, but you could have computers and a small library with where you could drop books off, and a courier could bring books back and forth if you order them there. And I just think that those things are small things that we should look at. And this gentleman's right, there's going to be tremendous advancements in the future. It's accelerating. Every 20 years, probably more is invented and brought forth in the past 100 years before that. So I think, I mean, you'll be able to sit in your easy chair since none of us need any exercise, and probably read a book on your television, just flip it on, your telephone, everything else from your easy chair at home. And this is going to cut into the library attendance, I think. So I just would encourage everyone to consider smaller projects, but things that really help. And I really like the Trafalgar Library. I think you did a great job there. And I actually went to the drive up. I didn't have anything to drop off, but I drove up to it. The only thing I could possibly see, be nice to have an overhang. So if it's rain or something, you had books, you don't want to get the books soaked. Just getting them out the door, you don't want to get soaked with it blowing in your window, snow or rain. So those are the little things that could be, I think people would really appreciate that. But I do appreciate all the efforts you have made, and tried to back the project, and I just didn't fly, the big library. So I think we need to look elsewhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you. To those of you that are late arrivals, there's a sign-up sheet up here that we'd like to get your name, your city, and email and address.
They signed
Oh,
out.
we still have one out there. Perfect. This has got check marks if you wish to speak. So my list tells me that Mr. Huber may speak, he may not speak. He's kind of a question mark. So
Are you going to vote on it?
At this,
No. We're gonna let you.
May I yield to the next speaker?
you may.
There is no one. No.
Do you folks wish to speak?
You may be yielding to
Anyone
no
else
one.
out there that would wish to?
You yielded.
I thought somebody else had something to say. I'm Dick Huber. I live in White River Township. What do I want in a library? You know, I don't really know. And I don't think most citizens really know what they want in the future library. I really kind of look at the board for leadership and saying, here's some services, some things that we could do, and this is what it could cost. What do you want? But first, before you do that, I think you're going to have to gain the confidence of the citizens back again, because I think they've lost a lot of that in the board. But I don't know what a library should look like, and I don't know what I really want. So I would ask the board to show some leadership and tell us some things. Here's what the future library would look like. Here's some things of what we could do for the libraries, and here's what it's going to cost. Thank you.
Anyone else? The floor is open. Beverly?
Do you want me to, I could stand up as a citizen and talk about what I just spent a week with 25,000 librarians talking about what the future of libraries is going to be.
I think that would be most helpful.
Go right ahead.
The podium is yours.
I'm going to do this as a resident, not as a librarian.
And what township do you live in, Ms.
I
Martin?
live in Franklin Township.
Okay.
Very proudly have for the past 9 years. As I said, my name's Beverly Martin. My daytime job is being the director of the Johnson County Library. My evening job is being an avid advocate of learning and education and entertainment and enjoyment. All the things that have, for me as a child, were met at as a library and are still met there today. And we were laughing that if the meeting tonight runs until 7, some of us always have our books in some format or the other. I tried going to an iPad. It didn't work too well for me, but I'm gonna keep working on it. I just like touching my books. And as a children's librarian, I always want us to think about what the value of that first reading experience with a book that maybe a child has chewed on. It's a tactile experience, it's about moving a page, it's about learning, seeing your first art in a beautiful picture book, maybe the first experience you have with fine art. And so as I think I shared with the board, Anaheim, California is not one of my favorite places in the world. And flew out there to be with 25,000 librarians, actually from all over the world. And the big question is, what is the future of libraries? And the future of libraries is exactly what Dr. Huber said. It's adjusting to what the public wants from their library. The mothers who want lots of different learning experiences for their children and want to have more programming, want to have the ability to come and stay at the library for a while and really do an experiment, manufacture a video disc. I think the biggest thing I heard as we've talked about the library as the community living room and the gathering spot for the library is this idea that it's going to become the collaboration center. The place where people want to go and to produce things. They may be a group of students that have as an assignment to produce a, PowerPoint's going to be an old thing. I'm going to bow to Bob. It's like some of the words, you don't even know what they're going to be. But you know, I started as a librarian 30 years ago and cried when they took out the card catalog, I'll admit it. I did. Because I'd filed in it for 15 years, but now it's like if I can't find it on my computer, I don't know where it's at any longer. So I think that you know, one of the things that I attended 3 programs done by architects on what libraries need to look like, and actually their projection is that libraries will get bigger because people's expectations are not for just space to put books. And a workstation for a computer takes the same space as 600 books. So those kinds of things that I hear people wanting to do at the library are things that take a lot of space. We were talking, Bob and I were talking about why we didn't know when this meeting in White River Township was going to be when we held the meeting in Franklin. It's because we didn't know when we could best move things around to get a meeting space. People argue that there's other places to meet. Obviously, there's not enough, and people are very sensitive to the fact that the library is sort of a very common ground, a very safe, very just a place that everyone's really comfortable in going, and we don't charge. I think that's the biggest thing. And then I went to a number of things of dealing with those people who are without. 25% of our population in Johnson County has no access to internet. When I saw that, and this was, of course, Indianapolis, but the Cathedral is going to try to do away with all textbooks by 2016. I remember the mother who I talked to just recently who was in tears wondering what was going to happen to her child who did not have a computer, didn't have internet access, and wasn't going to have a economics textbook next year. That's what the library is going to be about. It's going to always be what it's been for those. There's always been people that could afford everything a library provided, except for that one-on-one interaction with a person who's very knowledgeable and can help you navigate all this crazy technology. That's always been what libraries were about, and it's what it's going to continue to be. It's going to be about tactile books. I mean, yes, will the collections get smaller? I do believe they will. They're going to be replaced by all different types of things. But I sat in 3 different meetings that talked about how space will have to get bigger in sense to meet these needs that people have in expectation, in production labs, in meeting spaces, in the ability as a small group of business people to come together and do a business meeting with their colleagues on the East Coast or the West Coast, whatever coast they want to do. You know, we think about that our companies have got all that technology and they're just using it left and right, and the reality of it is it's expensive. And it's the type of thing that if you pull dollars, more people can use it. You can stay really, I've always said I don't want to be bleeding edge, but you can be cutting edge so that you have those resources for people. You know, we're talking about a way to start broadcasting our library board meetings, to have a book discussion group that is forced, if you want to stay at home and sit in the lounge chair, you could participate in that book discussion group at the library. And I'm not being facetious, because I really do believe that's what's going to happen. People are just.
Keep him away.
We put his wife puts a camera in front of him and we watch him. I mean, I'm not picking on you, because Forrest and I are friends. We talk about all these things that almost. But not, but I do think, I love what Bob had to say, and this kind of, my first article that I was asked and interviewed for the Daily Journal was, what had I seen in my library career in the technology changes? It was pretty massive, and I'd only been a librarian for like 25 years at the time. So I can't imagine what the future is going to be, but I do think there's always going to be a cultural pride in a building we call a library. I really just, call me Pollyanna, call me whatever you like, but I just believe people we talk about small communities who don't want to lose their post office, who don't want to lose their small school. A library is something that brings to a community a sense of itself and a statement about itself and what it cares about its citizens and what it cares about its kind of standard for the betterment of its community. Size-wise, I think that we'll just keep talking about it. Obviously, there were many, many things I think that happened when we went to referendum, and that's not what we're here to discuss tonight. But the reality of it is that there are people who love coming to this library. They love coming to every library in our system because of the relationship they have with staff, with the bond they've made with other, say a mom and their child that they've made at Story Hour, a group that have come for book discussions, or to come ongoing for the kind of things we do with county extension agents. So there's always going to be that need, and what better fit for that need is the library. So,
Thank you.
don't have answers. Thank you.
Does that spark anybody else to make a comment?
Are you open to questions?
Board President?
We're here to listen.
Are libraries able to assess what percentage of the population visit the library at least once a year? Do you have any sense of that at all?
Yes, we do.
Are those numbers, that percentage going up or down, or what's it doing?
It's going up, actually. And some of it has to do with computer usage. I'm going to look around and see if my IT person's in the room, because I hate to state statistics, but in terms of unique users, and I get asked that a lot, how many unique people who live in our population. We, according to the 2010 census, serve 104,000 people in Johnson County. We had 113, on computers alone, we had, I believe it was 113,000 unique uses. Now that is, you have to understand, we are in a community of Franklin with a lot of retirement community. And so you'll have someone coming to visit a relative at the Methodist home. They run in and check their email at the library. In terms of the people that check out materials, we know the number of people that visit the library. That's the number we're trying, I mean, to me, if you come once a year or you come every week, and some people actually come daily. That's the thing that surprised me when we had an open house here, and this one gentleman said, I come daily and sometimes I come twice a day. So, splitting that out between unique users is very difficult for us to do. One thing we don't keep, once you check a book back into the library, we don't keep track of your checkouts. And so some of the data that might be out there to assess in terms of how often did Dick Huber come to the library and how many materials did he check out, we don't keep that kind of information. And that's why when you ask me the question of how many unique users do we have, it's a difficult use to predict. I know that we had, we circulated over 1 million items last year, and we had, I'm going to get this wrong, 700,000 visitors, 750,000 visitors to the library, to the system, in the system. and trying to make which ones are unique, which ones come maybe only in the door to use this room right here. But that's a use that people ask for of their library. It's not necessarily coming in to check out materials, but it may be the person who comes in literally the only way they have to read the newspaper is to come to the library every day and read it at the library. So I'm not trying to not answer the question. It's just a very difficult answer, a very difficult question to answer. I know that in terms of the unique borrowers, we don't have it. We're still working on it. We're trying to do things by zip code, Dr. Huber. One of the things that we can do is we can start overlapping our data about our patrons with the data that we can get from GIS data. And we can tell you that there's a very large usage by parents with young children. And then those years when they are out involved in all these different sports activities, that number changes a bit, but you still have team. The reason we couldn't get in the meeting tonight till 6 is because there was a chef contest going on among a bunch of teens. So the kids, it's not they don't stop coming. And then they start going to school, and the interesting thing today is the number of students who are going to school online. And they come to the library because they can find a quiet place. And that's what we're being asked for more and more. Quiet study rooms, true quiet reading areas where they can get out of that environment, that embargement at home of noise and all the things that are happening and come and study. And then that starts running the entire gamut. And so, you know, I know there are people in this room of all ages that still read books. But I think we just had our 1000th checkout in less than a month of our electronic books yesterday. So that's the adaptability we're talking about, you know, in terms of meeting those needs that people have. And libraries are challenged right now when it comes to electronic books because the publishers haven't figured it out yet. And so our National Library Association and actually the International Federation of Library Associations around the world, that's one of the things they're really working with is publishers to understand libraries have never put publishers out of business. But that is their concern. And so a book that you might get electronically at home for say $14.99, it may cost us $79.99. But, and then they want to limit the number of circulations on that. But we're there and we're working on that all the time to figure those types of things out because we know that's what people expect from the library. Now, I think one of our board members had a wonderful idea. We've presented that to publishers is why couldn't you as an individual, just like you can go and buy a book and then you can bring it and donate it to the library, why not go and buy a Kindle version of something and then be able to donate your Kindle version? Guess who doesn't like that business model? That's Kindle. They want each one of us to buy that book. So that's where we're going to have to get is in a broader scope of sharing of electronic resources that way. But you know, I'm going to say this just because I can. I went to a luncheon, and what was shared with us was the number of books that are now available at your public library on an international basis. Anybody want to take a shot at that?
Oh, wow. The whole gob.
International?
Internationally.
Wow.
I can't even imagine.
5.3 billion.
I got a lot of reading.
That's a lot of reading. That means you might need to read in a lot of different languages, but it means that you can go to your Franklin library, your White River library, any library, and you have access to those books. So when someone talks about they have 300,000 titles on Amazon, I'm sitting in that luncheon thinking, well, it's nothing in comparison to what's out there and what's available. And digitalizing records is the big challenge to libraries right now. I mean, truly, I think if my staff, Susie, walked in, what they get on a regular basis is people coming in wanting us to have 3D copiers. The ability to take their film and create, I mean, the things that are out there, yes, they're out there and you can pay for them, But the expectation is, again, we go back, we pool our money, and we can make it easier. You can come and produce this wonderful little thing I got today of just a group of photos that one of the not-for-profits used as a donor's thank you. And those are the expectations that people have of the things that they want to be able to do. And they want to be able to come to the library and do that. Would that be a fair statement, Susie? In terms of their expectations, in terms of production, and
Yeah, I think there's a far edge of people. There are people that would expect that.
Can I ask a follow-up question? You made the interesting remark that readership or patrons are increasing, but you don't know the demographics of that increase. When I come to the library, I see a lot of elderly people, my age and older, and I see mothers, fathers with young children. But the generation in between that you're going to have to that you're going to address and with whatever, however you plan the library in the future, I don't know if you're getting 1% of that age range coming into your library, and 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you'll have zero. And libraries as we know it won't be necessary. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, unless you know the demographics of the type of people coming here, it's not going to help you how to plan ahead. And the other thing was, when you said the patrons are increasing, I didn't quite understand whether that's based on the number of items that they're taking out of the library, whether it's DVDs or books, or is it the number that when they slide their card?
it's the number of people that are visiting, that are attending programs, that are signing up for summer reading, and it is also the number of materials that are being checked out. I think that people find that hard to believe. Right now, there is an increase in actually the physical items they are checking out. But when you look at, and librarians are numbers of people, so we count the number of people that come to programs, and we count the number of children that sign up for a reading club, and how many of them actually finish. And one of the interesting things that I picked up in talking with a colleague is that some libraries are starting to take that data they're collecting in their summer reading programs. They're overlaying it with data from their school corporation, and they're looking at what children are increasing their reading ability, they're maintaining their reading abilities, and that's where I think libraries can play a great role. I mean, the board's hearing this from my mouth right now, as you are, but there are companies out there that, as long as we feel comfortable, libraries are very concerned about privacy of data that we collect. But I think you've hit the nail on the head until we start analyzing all this data and start looking at those demographics, which we can do by overlaying it with other sets of GIS is the best demographics there are. And Topeka, Kansas is an example where they've actually looked at what they call neighborhoods. And those neighborhoods kind of profile what is the user of that type of materials or that type of service. And what then what would they want from the library? And asking them, not just trying. I think that's the hardest thing for librarians. We don't want to tell people what they want. We want people to tell us. We had 10 public meetings trying to get people to tell us. And I think, Forrest, you were at a number of those. Dick was at a number as well. And it's hard. I mean, you know, we hoped for twice as many people tonight. I am so grateful that those of you that came because you've had wonderful ideas and you've had wonderful suggestions. But we have to build more dialogue.
Well, I was just going to say, the demographics of this audience
is not. I don't see it. I know.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're only getting viewpoints from a small portion of the population you're trying to take for.
Mm-hmm.
And I worry that there's no young people here. Not below 12 years old, but I mean 20 to 40.
When we were working on Trafalgar, I think one of the most fun things I did was I went over and I had a meeting with any of the kids that would stay after school, and we talked about what it was that they wanted the library to be and what they wanted it to be for them, and we got them engaged, and that was the hope. The whole process in Indiana has switched so drastically in how you do public buildings. We could only go so far, and then we'd hoped to have an approval for a bond that we could then start engaging people on what it was going to look like. I think this time around, Dick, you said it, is talk to people, tell us specifically what it is that your family, what, you know, if you have young children, what are they going to want in 12 years, 15 years, and try to start working the building backwards. I mean, we did a plan for the building that was reviewed as late as November of last year in terms of, you know, one of the things, we don't have money, operating money. Most libraries are putting in automatic retrieval systems that literally, first of all, you put RFID technology in the books. When the book's returned, it's checked out, it goes on a conveyor belt, it goes where it should. Some of them are putting these gigantic retrieval systems where they actually go on shelves, and it's all mechanized. I don't see that being something that the public library, the academics are doing that a lot. But you start cutting operating costs by putting in those kinds of systems. That type of system for a branch this size would take a room this big. That's where size comes in. And that was what was in the Franklin Library, was to, you know, drive up book drop force, check the book in as it goes into the, right there it's checked in, and it starts getting sorted and put on its way back to the shelf.
Could we ask for your name? I can't really see. Could you give us your name?
Oh, my name's Raj Panda.
Okay, thank you.
And I just apologize, just that I came here with the expectation that you were going to tell us your ideas. That's why I came here straight from work. But I guess you just want our input, and I wish I'd become a little bit more prepared. But at some point, how do we learn of what you are thinking about? Because people like Beverly are meeting 25,000 other librarians and getting input, so, you know, when do we learn about your ideas?
If I might, Roz, this is a public hearing, and it's being conducted the same way that public hearing in Franklin was, which was a full room, and the referendum's still fresh in everyone's mind, and we were given several ideas without a break for an hour and a half, and we've established that we would listen for 1 hour and a half, which is roughly 6 to 7:30. We would be here for any that might come after work to tell us their ideas. But we have a board meeting once a month, and the board is elected to allow the public to, I mean, the public is obviously invited to those meetings. They're open to the public, but they can also speak on any subject the last minutes of those meetings. But we plan on embarking on a new strategic plan moving forward after the public hearings are done in Trafalgar and Clark Pleasant as we move towards the fall. So our strategic planning will be an input of all these meetings, and then that process will start.
Thank you for
So right now, I mean, if you don't want to speak, anybody can speak to anybody, kind of break off and speak to us. But I mean, we didn't come to give you our agenda at this public hearing. And to be fair to Franklin, when we were at Franklin, we listened, and we were told by everyone there what their ideas were, and we want to keep that format the same. Somebody.
Bob.
I just wanted to add one thing. Believe it or not, I did cut some stuff out. When I talk, I feel like I talked forever.
Bob, can you stand so we
Sure,
can see
I'm sorry.
you? Thank you. Thanks.
Two comments.
Oh,
Number
and to the
one.
microphone, that will help
absolutely.
us in getting, so everybody else knows what you're saying.
I did cut some things out of what I said earlier, and one of them was a growing trend that I don't think is any surprise to you, is self-publishing. You said you're talking to publishers. Personally, I believe publishers are on their way out. I think in 15 years you won't see publishers, and you won't see any print books.
That was a big part of digital printing.
Many authors aren't bothering with print. If you want print, they'll put it on lulu.com and you can order a print copy. If you really have to have the feel of that paper, which I do, I'm with you. I'm a paper book, but I'm 69 years old. And you know, I remember in Franklin somebody said that he comes to the library and he gets a book. His kids don't even come to the library. They just download onto their Kindle, onto their Nook. Second thing is, you alluded to the difficulty and the challenge of having video conferencing. Google's making it pretty simple. It's not perfect yet, but within a year or two, it's going to be really easy. You can go do a Google shared document, you do Google Voice, Google Conference, all this stuff, and it's all free. It's as complicated as having your laptop go to Google. And I say it's not perfect. More and more computers are having front and rear facing cameras. I mean, the world is changing quick.
Yeah.
And so that sort of thing where you're thinking, oh, this is going to be a real challenge, it's going to be very expensive. I don't think so. I don't agree. I think in 2 years you're going to see that people with a laptop, you and I can have a video conference with this whole board, and they can all be sitting in their hot tub or sitting at home in their recliner chair or whatever, and we can all be sitting back and forth, and we'll say, Jay, would you turn down the hot tub? We can't hear what you're saying. Okay. Just those two things.
No, I actually looked at furniture like that. That just literally allowed for 6 people to sit here and kind
Like
of
a hot
view.
tub?
Yeah, the hot tub.
We're
It
just
was
kidding.
California.
See what she's looking at.
It makes me want to poke out my mind's eye. I really want to think about it.
You mentioned that after
Up
these,
to the
if I had to
microphone,
go to
please,
the
so
podium,
we
I'm
can't
too
hear
old to
you.
get up on it. You mentioned that after these meetings, you're gonna have some strategic planning going on. Does the board now have any plans at all for a 3-year plan, 5-year, 10-year plan? Is there nothing planned now at all? Are you waiting for these meetings, or?
We have a strategic plan that ends next year.
Next year.
Right, and so that's why we're in the process of now starting again to do a new strategic plan, probably a 3 to 5 year plan.
Okay.
Okay.
And there'll be lots of public meetings for those.
And there'll be lots of people asking, can you
Yes,
come up
ma'am.
to the mic?
I'd just like to say one thing. I do outreach commission work for my church in this area, and I agree with Bev when she talks about those that do not have the capabilities of owning a Nook or a Kindle or even a computer. There is a pocket of very low income in Center Grove area, not talking our other libraries, that I'm sure a lot of people are not aware of. These people can't pay their rent, they can't pay their utilities, they come to our food pantry to feed their children. You have to think of them also. I know everything's modern and it's advancing, but there's still going to be poor people, and there's still going to be children whose parents can't give them the things that so many of us can give our children. So we do have to remember those people when we're talking about what the library is going to do. I've used the library since I was 7 years old in California. I still come. It's not because I can't afford to buy a book. I don't want to own the book. I want to read it, give it back to you. You take care of it. That's the only time I don't feel that way is when I want to go in a swimming pool or the bathtub and I'm afraid I'll get it wet. But other than that, and I have a Nook, but you know what? You buy a book, you can't loan it to, you can loan it to one person for a short period of time, and then the publisher says, no, it's not yours any longer. I don't know how many people know that. That's not what I want to do with books. Okay? If I really like a book, I will buy it and I'll put it on my shelf, but very seldom. I come to this library and other libraries in Johnson County 2 to 3 times a week for different things. I see the people you haven't talked about are those that are tutoring children here in the library, okay? Whether there's a law that they can't or a rule that they can't meet at their home or whatever, but it is a safe place for someone who needs tutoring. The literacy program, I never see anything in the paper about your literacy program. English as a second language. These are things that our library has that I'm sure a lot of people don't know about, or because it's not for them, they don't care about. But we do have to consider the other people who live in Johnson County. Thank
Could
you.
you give us your name, please?
My name's Judy Seal.
Thank you, Judy. Just as a reminder, we do have a new website post. Is that right? Am I saying that right? That tells you what I know. And so get one of these flyers when you go out, because it is set up as a new one, and we have some up here, but so make sure you pick one of those up so you can tell exactly where you can find what we're talking about and what's going on.
Raj, that was kind of an answer to your, I was going to answer your question directly with, we have tried to put everything we can on the internet, but we also have tried to make it interactive, but instead of calling it My Franklin Library or My White River Library, it's now just the next chapter. Thank you.
I'd just like to say one more thing. I believe that the economy will recover. I think it was very unfortunate that when you asked for this bond, it was at a bad time for everyone. So I would like you to factor that in when you make your decision. I can tell you that if you had asked for money in 2006 when I bought my home, you would have got all the money you wanted. Things looked great. I believe those times will come back. So if it is to be that we're going to have a bigger library, because that's what certain people tell you, then you're just going to have to wait until we can all feel confident in our jobs and livelihoods, and then I think everyone will be very happy to allow you to have such a large bond, if that's necessary.
Thank you, Brian.
If I might, while you're talking about bonds, I want to state something that was talked about at the Franklin hearing, and that was by a couple people that Beverly had gone to the city council in 2009 to get a bond, to do a $2 million bond to study this process going forward. And at the Franklin hearing, we had a couple angry folks that accused this board of spending $2 million to get something to referendum. And as a point of clarity, there's still $1,615,000 of that bond still available to the library. So doing the math, it was $385,000 that was spent from 2009 through the referendum in May to get it to the referendum, not the $2 million that was previously told or stated in a couple letters to the editor and some of the patrons at the Franklin branch.
I'm sorry.
At least he said close.
Yeah.
If you don't do any big project immediately, why don't you start a building fund? So if someday you do need this, that you won't have to have such a large amount of money that you have to go to a referendum or something. Do you have anything like that?
We did, but with the changes in the law, you can't collect money for that any longer. It has to be done through this new process.
I would just think that.
Schools can do it, but libraries cannot.
Anybody else want to say something? We're here till 7:30. We're not moving, so.
Move to adjourn.
We'll just sit here. So if you are pleased with what you have heard and made your comments, we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for coming.
Madam President. I
Yes.
do.
Oh,
My
please,
name's
go
Ray
ahead.
Jones. I'm a board member. It's my 16th and last year on the library board. I feel like I'm the kid that came to school late and is now in the principal's office and all the teachers are standing around. And I had this excuse why I'm late. It's not going to hold up. I'm going to be in for a detention, some sort of punishment, probably here and at home. So I apologize for being late. I really have not a good excuse. I have
Bad
some, but they don't.
You have an excuse, but it's
It
not
won't
good.
hold water. It won't hold water. I was working for another organization at the time, by the way, but no mind.
We're just glad you got
I'm
here.
just sorry I was late.
Glad you got here.
We'll deal with
I'll
it
accept,
later.
yeah, I'll accept my thanks.
Young man, we'll see you after school. The librarian.